Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on simplifying complaints against CIS benchmarks with Progress Chef. My name is Lokesh Kannaiyan. I'm currently working as a senior product manager with Progress Chef. I take care of Chef complaints, Chef cloud security, and Chef config management products. I've been with Chef for more than 3 years. Today we also have Mia from CIS team. Mia, would you like to give a brief intro about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Mia LaVada. I'm a product manager here at the Center for Internet Security, also known as CIS. I'm responsible for the CIS benchmarks, a topic for the webinar today, as well as CIS hardened images. I'm really passionate about compliance, passionate about helping organizations achieve compliance with the CIS benchmarks. I'm even more excited to be joining the Progress Chef team today to talk about how our two organizations work together towards this end. Lokesh, I'll pass it back to you for some housekeeping items.
Awesome. Thanks, Mia, for the intro. Welcome to the webinar and pleasure having you in this session. Now let's quickly move on to the agenda. For today's session, we will start with Mia. Mia will be covering on CS benchmarks overview, how configurations play a crucial role in DevSecOps side, and she'll be giving a brief explanation on CS benchmarks and its internal functionalities and the anatomy side of CS side of things. So with that, I would like to invite Mia and cover CIS benchmarks. What do you, Mia?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lokesh. So I'll get started with a little bit of a background around who the Center for Internet Security is. So CIS started in the early 2000s trying to provide a solution to the industry around best practice guidance. At the time, there weren't a lot of organizations providing configuration level guidance, what the benchmarks are now today. Essentially, hardening systems and software to a set of best practices in order to defend against cyber attacks. We started off with a small group of individuals, both from private and public backgrounds, and with the aim of not only creating that best practice guidance, but also being as vendor agnostic, consensus based as we could, having an independent and trusted approach to the development and maintenance of that best practice guidance. Now, throughout the past 20 plus years, some of the enhancements and growth within our organization, in addition to the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, which houses our SOC and cyber threat prevention, detection, response for state and local governments. We've significantly expanded the organization, both in the type of guidance we provide and how we provide it. So our operational expertise within the SOC, within the staff members that develop this guidance has significantly grown. But we wouldn't be able to develop this guidance in the volume that we do and with the quality that we do without the communities that contribute to this guidance. So in addition to CIS staff members developing the benchmarks and the CIS critical security controls, we have thousands of global cybersecurity experts contributing to this guidance. Outside of our organization, vendors like Chef Progress, organizations like cloud service providers, many of the technology vendors themselves contributing to the guidance, the people who know these systems best, ensuring that not only is the cybersecurity recommendations, not only are they sound, but they're applicable to that specific technology at that specific version. And so that initial development, consensus based, independent, and trusted, is the core of what our organization does. But it is a sustainable model. We've been able to provide this guidance over the past 20 years as a nonprofit organization through memberships and partnerships like the one we have with Chef Progress. So focusing on the creation of the content, creation of the best practices, and then enabling other organizations to automate for specific use cases, as we'll talk about today. So as we get into the next slide here, I'll talk a little bit about the importance of secure configurations. So we'll talk about the CIS benchmarks, the product that CIS provides, the guidance that CIS provides. But in order to contextualize why that is important, we need to talk about the impact of misconfigurations, configuration drift, and alternatively, why secure configurations are so important. Some pieces of data on this slide here give a representation around the impact of misconfigurations or, the kind of the human element and where automation of your configuration management program is absolutely key. And the other impact here, you know, how long it takes to recover from a cloud misconfiguration or configuration drift in the cloud is really costly. And so your first step is using industry recognized standards, industry recognized best practices in order to make that a really automated, efficient system. You should be using tools and resources like the ones that we'll cover today. So the CIS benchmarks, we have over 100 available today. And we say they cover 25 vendor product families. So we're talking about operating systems, server software, your web apps, your databases, cloud providers, as you see on the right-hand side here, network devices, desktop software. Again, over 100 benchmarks, approaching 150. They're recognized by industry frameworks, a few that we have listed here, FISMA, FedRAMP, PCI DSS. This means when you get to the section of that framework and it says securely configure your systems and software, these frameworks specifically mention the CIS benchmarks as industry recognized hardening standards. So when you get to that point of your compliance journey, you can reference back to what we'll talk about today as a way to help you meet compliance, as a way to help you pass that audit. And as I talked about earlier, these benchmarks are community developed. So CIS staff members, SMEs, community experts in cybersecurity, and the technology vendors themselves are all working together to contribute to this guidance. It is a consensus-based process, so every suggestion is reviewed and every suggestion is reviewed, responded to prior to publishing a document. So it's not just CIS prescribing the set of recommendations. It's working with the global community to determine, with all of our collective expertise, what is the best security state for this particular system. Also, when we get into the next few slides, the meat of the benchmarks, I'll show you how they're mapped to the CIS critical security controls. So when we go into the anatomy of a benchmark, we're looking at the recommendation at the top. Ensure MFA is enabled for the root user account. This is marked as an automated recommendation, so it can be automated. The description section will give you an understanding of why we're telling you to do this. Why is this important for your system? If you're coming to this document for educational purposes, I want to learn why my organization should implement this policy. This is great information for you to use, whether it's your own education or education within your security and compliance office, or your team is responsible for security and compliance and you're looking to get better understanding of what this policy may do for you. This description section is really rich information. The rationale provides you detail on the security value. So not just why we're recommending it, but what specifically will this do for me in regards to the security of my system? And then the impact would describe relevant information about the applicability of the recommendation of the system. As an example, if you implement this recommendation, it may conflict with the usability of a certain system. And again, not only tells you why this is important for the security of your system, but it tells you how it may impact the usability of your system. So as we get into the next slide, the kind of second half of the benchmark section, we don't just provide what you should do. We don't just say set X to Y, enable MFA for root account user. We also provide audit and remediation steps for all of the benchmark recommendations. So here you can see it's fairly simple. You're going into the AWS Management Console, you're navigating to the IAM service, and you're looking at the setting on the root account user for MFA. And same idea with remediation. In this case, it's the CLI command, and you can run that CLI command to automatically remediate that setting. Again, we're not just telling you set X to Y. The benchmarks are prescriptive, they're instructive, and they're intended to be a starting point for your organization to harden your systems. And then as we get into the last slide here, and then I'll pass it over to Lokesh, I'll talk about how these are available. So I started at the beginning of the discussion saying how the benchmarks, CIS, are intended to be best practice guidance. We are a nonprofit organization. And so one of the key parts of our mission is to provide the benchmarks in PDF format for free non-commercial use. What we just looked at on the past two slides, those screenshots, are the actual documents that you would download if you were to take advantage of the free non-commercial use PDFs. But our relationship with Chef Progress falls into the Secure Suite membership category. So there's an end user tier, but what we'll focus on today is the commercial tier. So Progress Chef is a product vendor member with a certified tool that we'll look at as in Lokesh's part of the presentation. And again, what's really important to CIS, to the distribution of the benchmarks, particularly for organizations seeking compliance, is the automation component. And that's where the partnership is really important to our organization to enable folks like you who are really interested in that automation to take advantage of integrating this content into your DevSecOps pipeline. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Lokesh, to go into a bit of your points.
Thank you, Mia, for giving an overview about CS benchmarks, how CS benchmarks are written, how CS benchmarks are used or leveraged from PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, and other regulations, and how a security configuration plays a crucial role with respect to CS benchmarks. So I hope our audience will find this CS related overview very insightful and useful for them. Now let's see about like how Progress Chef compliance and security leverages or uses CS benchmarks and delivers value to the customers by means of continuous compliance solution. Before moving on to the chef compliance solution, let's quickly understand what are the security and compliance related challenges faced by our DevSecOps users or in DevOps users. So the first challenge is it's regarding increasing and complex compliance requirement. So the organizations must comply with regulatory requirements depending on the nature of the business, depending on the industry or the geography that they operate in. And there are multiple regulations that each organization need to comply with. And there are like a lot of requirements, especially like complex requirements coming along the way. And all these things, all these requirements, no, while implementing in the DevOps workflow, it is very challenging and it's a very daunting process for most of our users. And again, it's like a time-consuming process as well. So this is regarding first challenge. And the second challenge is adding security and compliance elements in DevOps workflow. That is like operational development security and compliance team. They all have their like own language. That is like their own code base, their own goals. They have like their own corporate culture. So if you think about like compliance team, they know about the regulatory policies. They don't know about the security control frameworks. They know about the compliance related frameworks very well. But if you take the developers or DevOps team, they do work with the code. They have very sound knowledge in programming industry or programming base. But whenever, if I'm a developer and if I'm working on any critical delivery, I won't pay close attention to the security related requirements, but I just pass on to this compliance team. So that was the behavior earlier. But nowadays, no, like all the teams have to align each other by speaking a common theme, like adhering to the security and adhering to the compliance aspects, and they have to take these things very seriously. And previously they used to have like different languages, they have different goals, and that used to cause a lot of misunderstanding. And sometimes at the last minute, no, a save-on issue raised by the security team can derail the entire production or the project delivery. So that was the cases previously, or in some cases, in some of the organizations, they also face this challenge. And the other challenge is that with increasing cloud and container adoption, organizations struggle to maintain their security practices, or they don't have any best practices, or they don't adhere to the recommended practices with cloud or container. In most of the organization, they forgot the concept of shared responsibility needed from the cloud vendor and from the organization. So that is another challenge. The organization has to be mindful in protecting the assets that is hosted in the cloud and container environments. And then the other challenge is like teams grapple with remediating compliance issues that is found during audit cycle. So there is no proper mechanism or no proper channel or a proper formal approach to remediate issues, especially in an automated fashion. So they follow a tedious manual remediation approach. So that is another challenge most of the teams faces. And another challenge with respect to visibility is like in most of the organizations or most of the compliance solutions, they provide very limited visibility to the into the overall compliance posture of the organization. And this can cause a lot of risk to the compliance and security team, especially let's say during audit time, if they have to provide any on-demand report to the auditors, fetching the report and gathering all the insights, it was a tedious process. So, and all occurs due to the visibility aspects of the product. So I'm sure most of the users here would have experienced similar challenges. And now let's see how our Progress Chef complaint solution address those aspects. Our Chef complaints and cloud security solution address all the challenges in 5 different phases. One is acquire phase, second is define phase, third is monitor phase, fourth is remediate phase, and fifth is reporting phase. So in the first phase, in the acquiring phase, the compliance users try to gather all the requirements. Let's say if I'm planning to do a GDPR or PCI, or let's say if I'm planning to run CIS benchmarks for this quarter, I will collect all the requirements. Gathering all the requirements is the first phase. So that is the require phase. So in this case, in the acquisition phase, let's say if I'm planning to run CIS benchmark, you will get all the CIS content or CIS cookbooks curated or developed by the Progress Chef. So you can get all the content in a code base. You can keep it ready. So that is in the acquisition phase. And in the define phase, what happens is, let's say if I'm planning to run CIS for Ubuntu, and this CIS for Ubuntu has 100 controls, and if I want to run only 50 controls, and the rest of the controls I want to waive it or skip it off. So in that case, we have an interesting feature called waivers, where compliance users can use a waiver feature and they can waive off the controls which they don't want to run in a scan job. So in the define phase, compliance users, they try to identify the controls which they want to run for the audit, run or monitor the audit cycle. So in the third phase is the monitor or audit cycle. So we have in the first two phases, we have acquired the content, we have defined the controls which we have to run. In the third phase, using Chef compliance audit or using Chef inspect as the engine, users can trigger the audit directly from Chef Automate, and they can trigger a scan job saying like, hey, this is the node, this is the target node, this is the integration you have done, and you can trigger a scan job there from the automate itself. So that is the third phase, like triggering an audit based on the CIS content. In this case, CIS Ubuntu is the one we will be triggering. And in the fourth phase, that's the remediation phase. So in the audit phase, we'll get to know what are the controls getting passed, what are the controls getting failed, what are the controls getting skipped, what are the controls getting waived off. So in the fourth phase, in remediation phase, we'll get to know what are the controls getting failed, what are the controls are misconfigured, and we have to do a remediation for the failed controls. So we have a concept of remediation cookbook where users can apply all the remediation content in an automated way. So they don't need to go and apply the remediation in a manual way. So this is the another USP for our Progress Chef complaints product. They can apply all the remediation in an automated way, and you can also select which control to remediate also. So that is another beauty of the product. So this is around the remediation cookbook. And now in the last phase, in the reporting phase, you will get to know you will get to know the entire visibility of the complaints posture, the entire CSPM posture, and you will get to know the scan history. You will get to know the different set of integrations. All these things you can see it in our automate dashboard. So that is the single pane dashboard we use for our product. So, all right. So this is the 5 different phases we use to tackle the complaints and security related challenges with our complaints and cloud security products. So moving on to the overview of Inspect. So Inspec is a product which we use, underlying product or underlying engine we use for auditing any targets or any nodes. So Inspec uses the concept of open source framework derived from RSpec, and so this is again like an open source related one derived from RSpec, and the basic functionality it's like it tests from one value to the another value, basically the desired state versus the expected state, and it all can be done with the help of the Ruby code. And like Inspect follows the DSL domain specific language, and again it's platform agnostic. And with the help of Inspect, you can test any packages, you can test any cloud resources, you can test the parameters or attributes of resources, files, and many more things you can test it. So this is a quick overview about Inspect. Now let's see how Inspect can be targeted across different platforms. So one of the key USPs for Inspect is like it's an agentless model, meaning like it can be targeted. You can install Inspect on the workstation on the desktop, and you can target different environments like Windows, Linux, AX, Solaris, and Cisco iOS. And we have support for target support or train support for AWS, GCP, Azure, Docker, Kubernetes, and VMware. So Inspect can be targeted on all these platforms. And the another USP for Inspect is it's not an agent based, it's an agentless base. You don't need to install Inspect on all these machines. You can install from your workstation, and you can target the nodes remotely. So that is the key USP for the Inspect, and you can trigger a scan job. So this is about the portability aspects of Inspect. And now let's quickly see the DSL concept, domain specific language concept. So based on the domain specific language concept, any control or any profile have one proper structure. So for example, let's say if I have to develop a cookbook for CIS Ubuntu platform, it should start with a profile, and it will have like list of controls, and within the list of controls it will have a different number of tests, and within test it will have like resources and matches. Maybe in the next slide you will get to know like what is a control, what is a test, and I will also show you an example CIS benchmark for Ubuntu, and I will also show you how the controls are translated into a Ruby code. So in the test, no, like so basically what a test. If in a test you can test A equal to B and B equal to C. If the condition is true, then you can mark it as pass. If A equal to B and B is not equal to C, then you can make it as a failed condition. So the test can be failed. So that is a basic underlying hypothesis for developing the test. So with that, how a test is developed. So this is the test block. Each profile will have like different set of controls, and within different set of controls you'll have different set of tests. So for example, we have described whether the file present in this path, it's a file or not, and in that file does the content match with hello world or not. So the file is the resource, and the matches concept is like it's called as B file or should match. So these are the matches used to match any values or match any conditions. For example, let's see a quick example on Ubuntu benchmarks. So these are the benchmarks which I've derived from, which I got from CIS website, what Mia was sharing. So we are like a premium vendor, premium customer for CIS, and we get a lot of benchmarks from them. So these are the benchmarks, and we used to translate all these things into a uh, code base. So for example, ensure mounting of IIFS2 file system is disabled or not. So these are steps they are suggesting, and we have translated all this into a code base. See, for example, ensure mounting of HFS file system is disabled, and these are the set of codes we have written. And if you see like a describe, this is like a describe a do, this is a test, this is another test, and this is another test. So this is like one control. So group of control makes one profile, and group of test makes one control. So this is how a profile is structured in inspect, and how a CAS benchmark is translated into different controls. I hope you understand the controls test and profile. And now I will quickly touch upon on key aspects around AWS and Azure resources. So this is a sample example for AWS. This is like an AWS IAM user resource, and they are testing whether the MFA is enabled or not. This is a basic functionality, and in with the help of with respect to Azure, in Azure using Azure Virtual Machine resources, they are checking for the location, they are checking for the size, and they are checking for the admin settings. And you can leverage the 500 plus resources written in with respect to OS. Here you can go like docs.chef.io/inspect/resources. You'll get the list of resources in OS, list of resources in Linux, list of resources in Windows, and we have a few resources for Alibaba and 500 plus resources for AWS, GCP, and Azure. So you can go and go into each of these resources, and you can start building your own set of controls. So this is how we build a control. Now this is again a sample set of controls which I captured from the transitive controls of Ubuntu from CIS benchmark, how an inspect profile will look like. So all right, so we have seen how an inspect profile or how an audit profile looks with respect to profile or test or controls or matches. Now let's see how the remediation related items works. So I've explained the remediation items in the 5 different phases. It comes in the 4th phase. So remediation basically, once you run an audit, you'll get to know like what are the controls getting passed, what are the controls getting failed. So we have to, as a compliance user, we have to take action on the list of failed controls. So from automate, you'll get to know the list of failed controls, and we have provided the remediation cookbooks. So you can take which are the controls you need to remediate, and then in each control, you can go ahead and set the remediate flag, that is run colon true. And if you set that flag, then remediation is enabled, and it will be triggered for changing the misconfigurations. So that is how the remediation works with the help of cookbook. And for more demos and for more resources, please feel free to check our tutorials page, check our YouTube webinars and YouTube demos. You'll get to know how an audit works, how remediation works. All these things you'll get to know in a jiffy. So now let's see the strength of CAS benchmarks and the strength of Progress Chef. So we have the concept of delivering the audit cookbooks and remediation in a premium content package. So with all the CAS benchmarks, we have developed for operating system portfolio, applications portfolio, and cloud environments portfolio, the audit cookbooks. And we have remediation same in the same way for the operating systems and the application portfolio. And we are yet to start the remediation cookbooks for cloud and container environments. It's in the roadmap. And for any cookbooks or any audit cookbooks or any remediation cookbooks, whenever you need for your testing, please feel free to drop a note, or if this cookbook is present, we'll share it. If not, we'll try to accommodate in the roadmap, and we'll share the in an appropriate timeline. And for every new audit cookbook, chef takes 30 to 45 days to develop an audit cookbook, and additional 30 days for developing the remediation cookbook. And for every add-on updates provided by CIS, yeah, based on the customer needs and based on the market needs, we try to prioritize and provide the cookbooks in 2 to 3 weeks. So that's a timeline we take for developing an audit cookbook or remediation cookbook. Yeah, so this is the bread and butter for our overall chef compliance product, and most of our customers are leveraging the CIS benchmarks efficiently. So yeah, that's about the premium content. And let's see the quick takeaways from this session. Mia has touched upon the overview of CIS benchmarks, how they are coming up with the benchmarks, how we have seen the anatomy of CIS benchmark, and how as a progress we are tying up with CIS benchmark. And we also briefly touched upon the security and compliance challenges. We have seen the different phases for chef compliance and how chef compliance plays a critical role in each of the 5 different phases. And we have seen a quick overview about inspect, and we also seen about the CAS Ubuntu benchmark on a high level, and how the benchmarks is translated into controls. And we also seen about the quick overview about the remediation side of things. All right, so we have come to the end of our session. Now let's move on to Q&A side of things. If you have any questions, please drop your questions in the Q&A panel.
Great. We're happy to answer any questions. Looks like we've got a few here in the chat. And I'll give the first one over to Lokesh. As you mentioned at the end, Lokesh, the speed to delivery for the premium content is likely important to people. Would you be able to share with the audience how quickly Chef provides that premium content to users after a benchmark is published?
Definitely, Mia. That's an interesting question. So whenever a CA's benchmark is published, we take a month or 45 days to develop an audit content, and then from there on we take additional 30 days to provide the remediation content. But again, this cycle is not the constant one for every benchmarks. It might vary depending on the number of controls and the complexity of the rules and controls involved in the benchmark. And we always pick the content for development based on the priority, and based on number of requests we are getting for a particular content from different customers. So if you want any content to be picked by chef, so please reach out to our customer success or our support team. We will try to add to our backlog and prioritize the content and ship it as soon as it's ready. So that's about the uh, delivery of CIS benchmarks. So there is another question coming up, like, can we edit or customize the audit profile of a CIS benchmark to suit our organization specific policies? So yes, you can edit and customize the audit profile of CIS benchmarks. So with our inspect engine, you can customize the controls and run the audit cookbooks. So we also have a demo video pertaining to customization of profiles in our YouTube channel. I would encourage you to take a look at the demo video for more information as well. So, and then there is another question: do we need to hire a Ruby or dev specialist to run your product? So it is not mandatory to hire a specialist as such. Anyone who understands the basic programming of Ruby should be more than enough. So for users who are not proficient in Ruby, we have another options. We provide automate as a platform where you can trigger the scan jobs directly from the UI, and basically run a audit on your target node. So this is on whether you need a Ruby specialist or to run the product. And then there is one more. So does the CIS inspect profile remediate the issue when you set the remediation flag to true, or do I need to run another cookbook to do that? Yes, whenever you set the remediation flag to true, based on that control, it will definitely remediate that controls or remediate the configuration issues, and you don't need to run another cookbook to do that. And then there is another question: we use complaints through the audit cookbook, which happens at the end of chef converge. Is the automated remediation option able to be used with this method? So there is, so with this option, we can't do the automated remediation option. So I would ask you to reach out to our support team, or customer architect team members to work with you on the specific use case and get it clarified. They can guide you better because there are certain steps you have to follow to address this one. All right, so these are the questions we had in the questions panel. So if you have any other questions, please reach out to us in the Chef Community Slack channel. We are available in Chef Community Slack channel for further clarifications. So we'll also host this recording in YouTube within a week for your future reference. And with that, I would like to wrap up the session. So thanks a lot, everyone, for joining this webinar. Hope you have enjoyed the session, and a special thanks to Mia for taking time to share insights about CIS benchmarks today. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great day. Bye.